Most people think the worst thing a family can hand you is a casserole you never liked, something bland and well-meaning, but easy to refuse with a polite smile. My family handed me a contract instead, 18 pages of cream cardstock, thick enough to feel important, placed neatly beside the Easter ham like it belonged there all along. There were 10 adults at that table, though the invitation had been framed as an intimate dinner. A chandelier hung above us, one my mother had once bought for a funeral and never taken down, casting a light that felt too bright, too deliberate. They believed they knew me, the agreeable daughter, the one who didn't argue, the one who absorbed things quietly. What they had forgotten, what they had chosen to forget, was that I read for a living. By the time my fingers touched that folder, something inside me had already sharpened. I had spent 11 months rebuilding a life after my divorce, in a small one-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner, where the rent was manageable and the silence was mine. I worked as a paralegal, reading contracts, spotting language that hid intention behind politeness. My family, on the other hand, specialized in rewriting history. A 6-week stay in my sister's guest room had somehow grown, in their telling, into months of dependency, a debt that needed repaying. I had paid for groceries, cleaned the kitchen, kept my head down, but none of that mattered. In our family, favors came with invisible invoices, and mine had apparently been accruing interest for years. So when Easter arrived and I saw the extra cars in the driveway, the carefully arranged seating, the way my mother smiled too quickly, I knew something had already been decided without me. They waited until we had eaten a few polite bites, until conversation had circled safely around weather and neighbors, before laying it out. My sister, composed but rehearsed, slid the folder toward me. My mother spoke about family, about sacrifice, about love. The word gift appeared more than once. They framed it beautifully. Altruistic surrogacy, a chance for me to help my sister after years of failed attempts to have a child. But even before I opened the folder, I understood the shape of what they were asking, not a question, but an expectation dressed as generosity. I asked to read it. That was my first refusal, though they didn't recognize it as one yet. My mother laughed, said I didn't need to go through every word, that it was standard. But I insisted, and Trevor, my brother-in-law, quietly supported that, which told me more than anything else had so far. So I opened it, flattened the pages, and began. The first page was exactly what I expected, language about love, about family, about voluntary agreement. Without coercion appeared early, which in my experience is usually the first sign that coercion is coming. Page 2 introduced money, but not for me, expenses routed through my sister, control centralized in her name. Page 3 tightened the grip, restrictions on my movement, my diet, my medical decisions, all requiring her approval. By then, the room had gone quiet in that specific way that means everyone is waiting for you to either comply or explode. I did neither. I kept reading. When I turned to page 4, I already knew that was where the truth would be. It always is. Clause 10 stripped away any parental rights I might have, irrevocably. Someone had even underlined the word, as if to make sure I didn't miss it. Clause 11 was worse, control over the pregnancy itself, including the right to terminate based on preferences. Not medical necessity. Preference. And then Clause 12, the financial penalty. If I withdrew at any point after signing, I would owe them over $100,000, plus legal fees. It wasn't a request. It was a trap, carefully constructed to make refusal impossible once I had agreed. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply took out my pen, circled the clause that revealed everything, closed the folder, and slid it back across the table. I stood, told them calmly I would not be signing or discussing it further, and left. That moment, quiet as it was, ended every relationship in that room in one way or another. The fallout came quickly. My sister posted a carefully worded story online, casting herself as the victim of a betrayal without naming me directly. My mother echoed it. Sympathy gathered around them at first. But I had already made a copy of the contract. I redacted the names, left the language intact, and posted it with a short statement. Not an accusation, just a warning. Read page 4, I wrote. The response was immediate. People recognized the coercion for what it was. The narrative shifted. My sister's post disappeared within days. My mother's followed. My brother-in-law showed up at my door, admitted he had known that my mother had helped shape the most controlling clauses. He left, and shortly after, so did he from their home, their marriage, their version of the story. My father, who had been silent for most of my life, came to see me a week later and said something honest for the first time, that he would no longer sit at a table where something like that could happen. It wasn't everything, but it was something. The rest unraveled slowly. My sister lost her position at the school. My mother stopped calling. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was clean. In that space, I built something else. Months later, I began the process to adopt. Not because of what they had asked me to do, but because I finally allowed myself to want something on my own terms. A year and a half after that Easter, I stood in a courtroom and became a mother to a little girl who examined me with quiet seriousness before deciding I was safe enough. There was no contract, no coercion, no conditions. Just a moment, simple and unadorned, where I chose and was chosen in return. Looking back, I understand something I didn't fully grasp that night at the table. They didn't underestimate my kindness. They underestimated my clarity. They thought I would confuse obligation with love, guilt with responsibility. But no is a complete sentence. It doesn't require justification, explanation, or apology. And sometimes, the most important thing you can do is read carefully, recognize the trap, and walk away without raising your voice.